The bus rolled through the gates of Fort Benning just after dawn. The Georgia sun was already hot, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon of heat. Inside the bus, 23 recruits sat in silence. 22 of them were men. And then there was Emily Carter. She sat in the back row, her small duffel bag clutched on her lap. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered in her chest like a drum. She was 24 years old, 5'4", and weighed barely 120 pounds. She had brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, hazel eyes that had seen too much too soon, and a jawline that didn't quit. Emily wasn't supposed to be here, at least. That's what everyone back home had told her. Her father had laughed when she said she wanted to join the Army Ranger selection program. Not a cruel laugh, but the kind that said he didn't believe her. Her brother had rolled his eyes. Her ex-boyfriend had smirked and said, "You, a ranger? Come on, Em. Be realistic." Even the recruiter had hesitated when she walked into his office in their small Tennessee town. He'd looked her up and down, then slid a brochure across the desk. "Have you thought about medical? Or administration? Those are great fields for women." But Emily didn't want medical. She didn't want administration. She wanted to be a ranger. She wanted to prove that she was more than what people saw, more than the quiet girl from the diner in Clarksville, more than the daughter who stayed home to take care of her sick mother for 3 years, while everyone else moved on with their lives. Her mother had passed 6 months ago, and Emily made a promise at that graveside, standing in the rain with mud on her shoes. She promised she wouldn't waste another second being small, being quiet, being invisible, so here she was. The bus hissed to a stop. The door swung open. A drill sergeant stepped aboard, his face like carved stone, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Off my bus. Now move, move, move." The recruits scrambled. Emily moved with them, her boots hitting the pavement hard. The heat slammed into her like a wall. Around her, the other recruits formed a chaotic line. She found a spot and stood at attention, eyes forward. The drill sergeant paced in front of them, his eyes scanning the group like a hawk searching for prey. When his gaze landed on Emily, he stopped. "You." Emily's heart skipped. "Sir, yes, sir." "You lost, Private?" "Sir, no, sir." "You sure about that?" "The admin building is 2 miles that way." A few of the recruits snickered. Emily kept her face blank, her eyes locked forward. "Sir, I am here for ranger selection, sir." The sergeant stepped closer. He was at least 6'3". He looked down at her like she was a child who'd wandered onto the wrong playground. "Ranger selection," he repeated slowly. "You." "Sir." "Yes, sir." He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "All right then. Welcome to hell, princess." More laughter from the line. Emily didn't flinch. The first week was worse than she'd imagined, and she'd imagined it would be bad. They ran 5 miles before breakfast. They did push-ups until their arms shook. They crawled through mud under barbed wire while sergeants screamed in their faces. They carried 70-pound rucksacks on their backs in the burning sun until some of them vomited on the side of the trail. Emily kept up, barely, but she kept up. The other recruits didn't make it easy. There was Jackson, a thick-necked guy from Alabama who'd played college football. There was Rodriguez, a former Marine who walked around like he'd already won. And then there was Bowers, a tall blonde kid from Montana who seemed to think the whole thing was a joke. On the second day, during a water break, Bowers nodded toward Emily. "Anyone want to bet how long she lasts?" Jackson grinned. "I give her 3 days, max." Rodriguez shook his head. "Nah, she'll be gone by tomorrow morning. She's too small. This isn't a game." Emily heard every word. She was sitting 10 feet away, unlacing her boots to check a blister. She didn't look up, didn't respond, just kept wrapping her foot in fresh tape. But inside, something hardened. That night in the barracks, Emily lay on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Her whole body ached. Her shoulders felt like they'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Her legs were on fire. She could hear some of the guys snoring already, their bodies used to this kind of punishment. She thought about quitting, just for a second. It would be easy. She could walk into the sergeant's office in the morning, say it wasn't for her, and be on a bus home by noon. No one would blame her. Everyone expected it. But then she thought about her mother, about the promise she made, and she thought about the smirks, the laughter, the way they looked at her like she was a punchline. Emily turned on her side and closed her eyes. She wasn't going anywhere. By the end of week 1, 4 recruits had quit. Emily wasn't one of them. On the morning of day 8, the drill sergeant lined them up for inspection. He walked down the row slowly, checking boots, uniforms, posture. When he reached Emily, he stopped. "Still here, Carter?" "Sir, yes, sir." Surprised? "Sir, no, sir." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved on. Jackson muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. "Doesn't matter. She won't make it through the ruck march." The ruck march was scheduled for day 10, 12 miles, full gear, timed. If you didn't finish in under 3 hours, you were done. Emily knew this was the test, not just for her body, but for her will. The night before the march, she sat alone outside the barracks cleaning her rifle. The sky was dark, full of stars. The Georgia air was thick and warm. Bowers walked past with Rodriguez. He glanced at her and shook his head. "Still here, huh?" Bowers said. "Cute." Rodriguez laughed. "Give it one more day, man." "She's done." Emily didn't look up. She just kept cleaning her rifle, her hands steady, her jaw tight. She'd show them. She'd show all of them. The ruck march began at 0500 hours. 19 recruits stood at the starting line, their rucksacks loaded with 70 pounds of gear. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the air was already thick with humidity. Emily adjusted the straps on her pack, feeling the weight settle against her spine like a bag of concrete. Her legs still ached from yesterday's obstacle course. Her shoulders were bruised from the log carries, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was finishing. The drill sergeant stood at the front, stopwatch in hand. His face showed nothing. No encouragement. No sympathy. Just cold evaluation. 12 miles, he barked. 3 hours. If you fall out, you're done. If you quit, you're done. If you can't hack it. His eyes flicked to Emily. "You're done. Am I clear?" "Sir, yes, sir." "Move out." They started at a brutal pace. Jackson took the lead immediately, his long legs eating up the ground. Rodriguez and Bowers fell in behind him. Emily found herself in the middle of the pack, her shorter stride forcing her to work twice as hard to keep up. 1 mile in, the weight started to bite. The straps dug into her shoulders. Her lower back began to scream, but she kept her breathing steady, her eyes focused on the road ahead. 2 miles. 3 miles, the sun rose, turning the sky pink and gold. It would have been beautiful if Emily had the energy to notice. Instead, she focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Left, right, left, right. By mile 5, 2 recruits had fallen out. One collapsed on the side of the road, gasping. Another stopped to vomit and couldn't start again. The medic truck picked them up without a word. Emily kept moving. At mile 7, Bowers dropped back beside her. His face was red, dripping with sweat, but he still had enough energy to talk. "How you holding up, Carter?" he said, his voice mocking. "Need us to slow down for you?" Emily didn't answer. "Didn't even look at him. I'm serious," Bowers continued. "No shame in quitting. You lasted longer than anyone thought. You can walk away with your head up." Rodriguez jogged past them, glancing back. "Come on, Bowers. Leave her alone. She'll drop on her own soon enough." They pulled ahead. Emily watched their backs disappear around a bend in the trail. Her legs felt like lead. Her lungs burned. The pack felt like it had doubled in weight. Every step was agony, but she didn't stop. Mile 8. Mile 9, the group had spread out now. Jackson was far ahead, almost out of sight. A handful of recruits clustered behind him. Emily was near the back, her pace slowing despite her best efforts. And then, at mile 10, her left boot caught on a root. She stumbled, her knee slamming into the dirt. The weight of the rucksack drove her forward and she hit the ground hard, palms scraping against gravel. For a moment, she just lay there. Her body begged her to stay down, to give up, to let the medic truck take her away. Behind her, she heard footsteps slowing. She looked up. It was Davis, a quiet guy from Ohio, stocky and steady. He'd barely said 2 words the whole week. He stood over her now, his face unreadable. "You good?" he asked. Emily pushed herself up to her knees, ignoring the blood on her palms. "Yeah, you sure?" She got to her feet, adjusting the rucksack. Her knee throbbed, but nothing felt broken. "I'm sure," Davis nodded once. Then he started running again. Emily followed. 2 miles left. Her vision started to blur at the edges. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. She couldn't feel her shoulders anymore. They'd gone numb under the weight. Her legs moved on autopilot, muscle memory carrying her forward when willpower wasn't enough. She thought about home, about her mother's funeral, about standing in the rain making that promise. She thought about Jackson's smirk, Bowers's laugh. the recruiter who told her to try administration, and she kept running. When she crossed the finish line, the clock read 2 hours and 47 minutes. She'd made it. With 13 minutes to spare, Emily dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Around her, other recruits were doing the same, their faces gray with exhaustion. The drill sergeant walked among them, checking names off his list. When he reached Emily, he stopped. "Carter." She looked up, still trying to catch her breath. "Sir, you finished." "Sir, yes, sir." Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite respect, not yet, but maybe recognition. Recognition that she was still here when others had quit. He moved on without another word. Jackson walked past, his face still flushed but his breathing already steady. He glanced down at Emily and shook his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Bowers was right behind him. "Barely made it," he muttered. Clock was almost up. Emily didn't respond. She just sat there in the dirt, her body wrecked, her hands bleeding, her heart pounding, but she'd finished. That night, the remaining recruits gathered in the mess hall. 17 now. 6 had quit or failed out. Emily sat alone at the end of one table, working through a plate of food she barely tasted. Her entire body ached. She'd wrapped her hands in bandages and her knee was swollen beneath her uniform pants. Across the room, Jackson, Bowers, and Rodriguez sat together, laughing about something. Every few seconds, one of them would glance her way. She knew what they were thinking. That she got lucky, that the ruck march was just one test and there were dozens more to come. Harder tests, tests she couldn't pass, and maybe they were right. The next 2 weeks were a blur of pain and exhaustion. They ran the obstacle course until their hands bled. They did night navigation exercises in the woods, stumbling through darkness with only a compass and a map. They practiced hand-to-hand combat, learning holds and strikes and how to fight when everything else failed. Emily failed the rope climb 3 times before she finally made it to the top. She came in last on the combat swim. During live fire drills, her hands shook so badly the instructor pulled her aside. "You scared, Carter?" he asked. "Sir?" "No, sir." "Then what's the problem?" She didn't have an answer. She just gritted her teeth and ran the drill again, and again, and again until her hands stopped shaking. By week 4, 11 recruits remained. The instructors got meaner. The exercises got harder. Sleep became a distant memory. Emily moved through each day like a ghost, her body running on fumes and stubbornness. But something had started to change. The other recruits stopped making jokes, stopped whispering bets about when she'd quit, because she hadn't quit. And week after week she was still there. Davis started nodding to her in the mornings. A small gesture, but it meant something. Even Jackson had gone quiet. He didn't mock her anymore. He just watched her sometimes, his expression unreadable. But Bowers and Rodriguez weren't done yet. During a field exercise in week 5, the recruits were split into pairs for a navigation course. Emily was paired with Rodriguez. They were dropped in the woods 10 miles from base and given 6 hours to find their way back. Rodriguez set a brutal pace from the start, barely glancing at the map. Emily struggled to keep up, her shorter legs working overtime. 3 hours in, they stopped at a checkpoint. Rodriguez looked at her, his face hard. "You're slowing me down," he said. "I'm keeping up," Emily replied. "Barely." He folded the map. "Listen, Carter, I don't know why you're here. Maybe you've got something to prove. Maybe you think you're making history. But this isn't a place for you. Rangers die in the field, and if you can't keep up in training, you'll get someone killed in combat." Emily met his eyes. "I can keep up." "No," Rodriguez said quietly. "You can't, and everyone knows it. You're just too stubborn to admit it." He turned and started walking again, leaving her standing alone in the woods. For a moment, Emily didn't move. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was in over her head. Maybe all of this, the pain, the exhaustion, the mockery, was for nothing. But then she thought about that promise again, the one she made in the rain, and she started walking. She didn't just keep up with Rodriguez for the rest of the course. She led. Week 6 brought the combat simulation. The instructors called it the Crucible. 72 hours in the field with minimal sleep, minimal food, and maximum pressure. The recruits would be tested on everything they'd learned: navigation, tactics, weapons handling, teamwork, and mental endurance. Only 9 recruits remained now. Emily had outlasted 14 others. The night before the exercise, the drill sergeant gathered them in the briefing room. His face was stone, his voice flat. "This is where we separate rangers from failures," he said. "Some of you will break. Some of you will quit. And some of you," his eyes swept the room, "will prove you belong here." Emily sat in the front row, her notebook open, her pen ready. She'd stopped sitting in the back weeks ago. Stopped trying to be invisible. If they were going to judge her, let them judge her at her best. The exercise began at midnight. They were divided into 2 squads and dropped in different sections of the training area. Thousands of acres of dense Georgia forest. The mission was simple: navigate to 3 checkpoints, complete tactical objectives at each one, and make it to the extraction point within 72 hours. Emily's squad had 5 members: Jackson, Davis, Bowers, a quiet recruit named Torres, and herself. Jackson was made squad leader. No one questioned it. He was the strongest, the fastest, and he'd been leading the pack since day 1. But 20 minutes into the exercise, Jackson made his first mistake. He misread the map and led them a mile off course. By the time Davis noticed, they'd lost precious time. They had to backtrack through thick brush in complete darkness, stumbling over roots and rocks. "Damn it," Jackson muttered, studying the map with a red lens flashlight. "This doesn't make sense." Emily moved beside him. "Can I see?" He handed it over, frustrated. She studied the terrain, compared it to their surroundings, and pointed. "We're here. The checkpoint is northeast, not north. There's a ravine we need to go around." Jackson stared at her. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He looked at the map again, then nodded slowly. "All right. Lead the way." Emily took point. 30 minutes later, they reached the first checkpoint. The objective was a simulated hostage rescue. 2 instructors played hostages inside a small building. The squad had to breach, secure the hostages, and neutralize the threats, played by other instructors with simulation rounds. Jackson called the team together. "Bowers, you're on the door. Torres, cover the rear. Davis and Carter, you're with me on entry." They moved into position. Emily's heart pounded, but her hands were steady on her rifle. This was it. Everything she'd trained for. "Breach!" Jackson shouted. Bowers kicked the door. It flew open. Emily went in second, her weapon up, scanning for threats. An instructor appeared from behind a wall. Emily fired twice, center mass. Simulated hits. He went down. Another instructor emerged from a side room. Davis took him out, 30 seconds. The room was clear. The hostages were secure. Jackson looked at Emily, something like surprise in his eyes. "Good shots, Carter." She nodded, adrenaline still pumping through her veins. They moved to the second checkpoint. Then the third. Emily's navigation kept them on track. Her tactical instincts kept them alive during the simulations. And slowly something shifted. Jackson started asking for her input. Davis stuck close to her during movements. Even Torres, who barely spoke, gave her a nod of approval after she spotted an ambush before it happened. But Bowers stayed cold. On the second night, during a brief rest period, Emily sat with her back against a tree, chewing on an MRE that tasted like cardboard. Her body was past exhaustion. She'd had maybe 3 hours of sleep in the last 48. Bowers sat across from her, his face lit by moonlight. "You're really not going to quit, are you?" he said. Emily looked up. "No. Even though you don't belong here, I do belong here." Bowers leaned forward. "No, Carter. You don't. You're good at maps. I'll give you that. But when we get into real combat, when it's life and death, you won't be strong enough. You won't be fast enough. And someone is going to die because of it." Emily kept her voice level. "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do. I've seen combat. Afghanistan 2 tours. I know what it takes. And you don't have it." He stood and walked away, leaving Emily alone in the darkness. His words dug into her like knives, not because they were cruel, but because part of her feared they might be true. She thought about her mother again, about the promise, and she thought about something else her mother had told her once, years ago, when Emily was struggling in school. "People will always doubt you, sweetheart," her mother had said. "The question is, do you doubt yourself?" Emily closed her eyes. No, she didn't. The final objective came on the 3rd day. The squad had to assault a fortified position, a mock enemy camp with multiple instructors defending it. It was the hardest challenge yet, designed to test everything: tactics, communication, courage under fire. Jackson gathered the team behind a ridge overlooking the camp. They were all exhausted, filthy, running on empty. But this was the last push. We go in fast and hard, Jackson said. Two-pronged attack. Bowers and Torres from the left. Davis and Carter from the right. I'll provide suppressing fire from here. They moved into position. Emily's legs shook as she crept through the brush. Her rifle felt heavier than ever. Beside her, Davis moved like a shadow, silent and focused. They reached the edge of the camp. Jackson's voice crackled over the radio. In position. Wait for my signal. Emily's finger rested on the trigger. Her breathing slowed. Everything narrowed to this moment. Execute, Jackson said. Davis went first. Emily followed, her weapon up, her eyes scanning. An instructor appeared to her left. She fired. Hit. Another to the right. Fire. Hit. They moved through the camp like a machine, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats. Simulation rounds cracked through the air. Instructors shouted. Smoke grenades filled the area with gray fog, and then Emily heard it. A shout from Bowers's position. Man down. Torres is hit! Emily's blood went cold. She knew it was a simulation, but the training felt real. Torres was wounded. He needed evacuation. Jackson's voice came over the radio, tight with stress. Carter, Davis, get to Torres. Bowers, cover them, Emily ran. She didn't think. She just moved. She found Torres lying behind a barrier, clutching his leg. An instructor stood nearby with a clipboard, evaluating. He's got a simulated gunshot wound to the femoral artery, the instructor said. He's got 3 minutes before he bleeds out. What do you do? Emily dropped to her knees. Her mind raced through her medical training. Tourniquet, pressure, elevation. Her hands moved automatically, pulling a tourniquet from her kit, wrapping it around Torres's thigh, tightening it. Stay with me, Torres, she said, even though she knew it was just a drill. Bowers appeared beside her, breathing hard. We need to move. They're flanking us. Not until he's stable, Emily said. We don't have time. We make time. She finished securing the tourniquet, then grabbed Torres under the arms. Davis took his legs. Together, they carried him back to cover while Bowers laid down suppressing fire. They made it. Torres was safe. The objective was complete. The instructor with the clipboard watched the whole thing. He didn't smile, but he wrote something down and nodded once. When the 72 hours were over, all 5 members of Emily's squad made it to the extraction point. The other squad lost 2 members. One quit in the middle of the night. Another failed a critical objective. The drill sergeant met them at the extraction zone. He looked them over, these exhausted, muddy, hollow-eyed recruits, and for the first time in 9 weeks, he almost smiled. Good work, he said. That night, back at the barracks, Emily collapsed on her bunk. She didn't even take off her boots. She just lay there staring at the ceiling, too tired to move. Davis walked past and paused. Hey, Carter, she looked over. That thing you did with Torres, that was solid. Thanks. He nodded and kept walking. A few bunks down, Jackson was cleaning his rifle. He glanced her way. You did good out there. Emily sat up slowly. Yeah? Yeah, he paused. I didn't think you'd make it this far. I was wrong. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. Emily lay back down, her body aching, her mind buzzing. 9 weeks down, 3 to go, she was going to make it. She could feel it now. But Bowers wasn't done yet. 2 days later, Emily was called into the commander's office. She had no idea why. Emily stood outside the commander's office, her stomach tight with anxiety. She'd been pulled out of morning PT without explanation. The other recruits had watched her go, their faces full of questions. Even Davis had looked concerned. Now she stood at attention in the hallway, still in her sweat-soaked PT uniform, trying to figure out what she'd done wrong. The door opened. The commander, Colonel Hayes, a stern woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and 3 combat deployments under her belt, looked out. Carter. Come in, Emily entered. The office was small and functional. A desk, 2 chairs, an American flag in the corner. On the wall hung photos of Hayes with her unit in Iraq. Sit, Hayes said. Emily sat, her back straight, her hands on her knees. Hayes settled behind her desk and opened a folder. She read in silence for a long moment. Emily's heart hammered. Finally, Hayes looked up. Do you know why you're here? No, ma'am. A formal complaint has been filed against you. Emily's blood went cold. Ma'am? Hayes turned the folder around so Emily could see. It was an official report typed and signed. Emily's eyes went to the signature at the bottom. Private First Class Derek Bowers. Private Bowers has accused you of receiving preferential treatment, Hayes said, her voice neutral. He claims that instructors have been going easy on you because you're female, that your scores have been inflated, that you've been given advantages the male recruits haven't received. Hayes paused. He's requesting a formal investigation. Emily felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Ma'am, that's not true. I know. Emily blinked. Ma'am? Hayes closed the folder. I've been watching you since day one, Carter. Every instructor here has. You know why? No, ma'am. Because you're the first woman to make it past week 3 in this program. That makes you a variable, a question mark. So we've been watching you closer than anyone else, evaluating every test, every score, every movement. Hayes leaned forward. And I can tell you without question, you have not received preferential treatment. If anything, you've been held to a higher standard. Relief flooded through Emily, but it was mixed with anger. Then why did Bowers file the complaint? Hayes finished. Because he's scared. Scared? You're currently ranked 4th in the class, Carter. Bowers is ranked 5th. He's been a soldier for 6 years. He's got combat experience, size, strength, every advantage. And you're beating him. Hayes smiled thinly. Some men can't handle that. Emily's hands curled into fists. So what happens now? Now I file this complaint where it belongs, in the trash. Hayes stood. But I'm telling you this because you need to understand something. You will face this again. If you make it through this program, if you become a ranger, there will always be someone who says you didn't earn it. That you were a diversity hire. That standards were lowered. You need to decide right now if you can live with that. Emily met her eyes. I can, ma'am. Good. Hayes walked to the door and opened it. Because you're about to make history, Private. Don't let anyone take that from you. Emily stood, saluted, and walked out. In the hallway, she let out a long breath. Bowers had tried to sabotage her. And he'd failed. But instead of anger, Emily felt something else. Determination. The final 3 weeks were the hardest yet. They did high-altitude training, learning to jump from planes and navigate under canopy. They practiced close-quarters combat in kill houses, moving through rooms with live instructors playing enemy combatants. They ran mission simulations that lasted days, operating on 2 hours of sleep and cold rations. Emily pushed through all of it. Her navigation scores were near perfect. Her marksmanship improved until she was hitting targets the male recruits missed. During a final combat simulation, she led a fire team through an ambush and got everyone out alive. Bowers barely looked at her anymore. He'd gone silent, his face hard, his movements mechanical. He was still in the program, but the fire had gone out of him. Jackson, on the other hand, had become an unexpected ally. You're going to finish top 5, he told her one night while they cleaned weapons. Maybe top 3, Emily shook her head. I'm just trying to graduate. Nah, Jackson grinned. You're better than that. You know it, I know it. Everyone knows it. She didn't believe him. Not until the final test. The final exercise was a 12-hour endurance course that combined everything. Rucking, obstacle courses, marksmanship, land navigation, and a written exam on tactics and strategy. It was designed to push recruits to absolute failure. 7 recruits remained. Emily was one of them. She started the course at 0400 hours, her rucksack loaded, her rifle clean, her mind sharp. She ran the 12 miles in under 2 hours. She cleared the obstacle course without a single fault. On the range, she put 30 rounds into a target at 300 yards. 28 were kill shots. The land navigation section took her through 10 miles of forest. She hit every checkpoint early, and the written exam, the part she'd worried about most, felt like it was designed for her. Questions about tactics, strategy, leadership under fire. She answered everyone, her hand steady, her mind clear. When she turned in her test, the proctor glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. You sure you're done, Carter? Yes, sir. You've got 20 minutes left, I'm sure, sir. He nodded slowly. All right, then. 2 weeks later, graduation day arrived. The ceremony was held on the parade grounds at Fort Benning. Families filled the bleachers. Flags snapped in the wind. A military band played as the 7 graduates stood in formation, dressed in their Class A uniforms. Emily's hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She'd made it. Against every odd, every doubt, every whispered bet, she'd made it. Colonel Hayes stood at the podium, her voice carrying over the crowd. "These 7 soldiers represent the best of the best," she said. "They have endured 12 weeks of the hardest training the United States Army has to offer. They have proven themselves worthy of the Ranger tab, and today we honor their achievement, one by one." Hayes called the graduates forward to receive their tabs. Private First Class Torres. Torres walked forward, saluted, received his tab. Applause. Private First Class Davis. Davis followed. More applause. Private First Class Bowers. Bowers stepped forward. His face was blank. He took his tab and returned to formation without a word. Private First Class Jackson. Jackson grinned as he received his tab. His family whooped from the stands. 3 names left. Emily's pulse quickened. Hayes looked down at her notes. Then she looked up, and for the first time she smiled. "Before I call the final names, I want to recognize something," Hayes said. "Every class has a distinguished honor graduate, the recruit who scores highest across all evaluations. This graduate represents the absolute best of an already elite group." Emily's breath caught. This cycle, our distinguished honor graduate showed exceptional skills in navigation, marksmanship, tactical leadership, and physical endurance. This soldier exceeded every standard and set a new bar for future classes. Hayes paused. Private First Class Emily Carter. For a moment, Emily didn't move. She couldn't. Top of the class, not just graduated. "Top of the class, Carter," Davis whispered beside her. "That's you, go." Emily stepped forward, her legs shaking. The crowd erupted in applause. She could barely hear it over the roaring in her ears. She reached the podium. Hayes held out the Ranger tab, a small black and gold patch that meant everything. "You earned this," Hayes said quietly, so only Emily could hear. "Don't you ever forget that." "No, ma'am." Hayes pinned the tab on Emily's uniform, then saluted. Emily saluted back. The applause grew louder. Emily turned and walked back to formation, the tab on her shoulder, her head high. She glanced at Bowers. His jaw was tight, his eyes forward. He didn't look at her, but Jackson did. He caught her eye and nodded, respect written all over his face. After the ceremony, families flooded the field. Emily stood alone for a moment, watching the reunions around her. Her father hadn't come. He'd said the drive from Tennessee was too long. Her brother had work, but she didn't feel alone. "Carter." She turned. Colonel Hayes stood there, her hand extended. Emily shook it. "You know what you did today?" Hayes asked. "Ma'am?" "You opened a door. Every woman who comes after you will have an easier path because you walked it first. That's worth more than any tab." Emily's throat tightened. "Thank you, ma'am," Hayes smiled. "Thank you, Ranger." That night, Emily sat alone on the steps of the barracks, her duffel bag packed, her Ranger tab still pinned to her uniform. She'd ship out to her first assignment tomorrow, a base in Washington where she'd join an elite unit. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo she carried with her. Her mother smiling, standing in their kitchen back in Clarksville. "I did it, Mom," Emily whispered. "I kept my promise." A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Carter," she looked up. Jackson stood there, hands in his pockets. "Wanted to say something before we all head out," he said. "I gave you 3 days. Remember?" Emily nodded. "I was wrong. About everything." Jackson sat down beside her. "You're one of the toughest soldiers I've ever met. And I've met a lot. Thanks, Jackson. You going to stay in? Make a career of it?" Emily looked at her tab, gleaming in the fading light. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am," Jackson smiled. "Good. We need more Rangers like you." He stood, offered her a fist bump, and walked away. Emily sat there a while longer, watching the sun set over Fort Benning, the place where everyone said she'd quit by week 1, the place where she'd graduated top of her class. She thought about the recruiter who'd pushed the admin brochure across his desk, about her ex-boyfriend who'd laughed, about Bowers and his complaint, about every doubt, every smirk, every whispered bet, and she smiled. They'd said she couldn't do it, but she had, and this was just the beginning.